And before we get started with all of my questions, I would love if you could tell us a little bit about your background and how you stumbled across the makeup historian.
Of course. So right now I'm 19 years old. I just turned 19 in April. I just finished my freshman year at Chapman University in Orange. I just declared a major a couple weeks ago, actually, in strategic and corporate communication with a minor in political science. Yeah. So, yeah. I was undeclared this whole first year, and then I just stumbled across it, and I'm like, oh, this fits me, and it really goes hand in hand with political science, because that's definitely what I want to be a part of after college in my career. But yeah, I lived on campus this year. I thought it was really great. I joined the Chapman Republican Club, and because of that, I joined the Lincoln Club Institute, where I met one of your previous podcasts past people. I don't know the word, sorry. Andrea, yeah. And I worked for her friend Amanda in club with her intern. Yeah. So I got to sit across from Andrea a lot, like on the other table, and with her husband Brian and everything. So I got to know them. And when Andrea posted her snippet of a podcast clip with you on her Instagram story, I clicked on it and made sure to save it. And then I was like, I really need to listen to this. So I had like an hour and a half drive home from work the other week, and I started listening to it, and I loved it. And I'm like, I really need to reach out to her. And because I never wanted to tell my story before this, I wanted to just like put it all away, but now here I am. And I think it's important, and I'm glad that I have the opportunity.
I'm so glad that we are getting the opportunity as well, because and this is kind of what I was hoping the show would grow into, where people felt comfortable enough to reach out. And if they had a story that they wanted to preserve, to make sure that history remembered, that they would do that. And thankfully, social media has been a blessing in that sense. So I'm super happy that you did. And also, I'm really happy to hear about your career aspirations, because we need more good people in politics. So I'm very happy. Yeah. Awesome. Well, I have a question for you. Have you always been in California? I'm sorry. Did you move here for Chapman?
So I was born and raised in Corona. I've never left, and I planned on staying here. And that's why for college, I didn't want to go out of state, because I'm a very family-oriented girl, and I'm very close to my little brother. He's 12. So I didn't want to leave for college and then come back, and, everybody, it's just all different. Yeah. So I made sure to stay close to home, and I don't plan on leaving anytime soon.
I like that. As far as I know, I'm here too. I'm in it. I'm in for the fight. I love California. It's my home. And so I'm super happy to hear that. I don't think I'll leave unless God tells me to. Yeah. So before we dive into the questions that I had sent over to you, do you want to give us a little bit more of like kind of a brief background of your story that you really want to bring attention to?
Sure. So I definitely have always had a thing for politics, always interested in me since about middle school. I kind of first heard about abortion 6th or 7th grade, and like my friend in 7th grade was like, oh, what is that? And I'm like, you don't know, And so I was like, oh, I think a lot of people are a lot more oblivious to what's going on than what I thought. And so just little by little, I started listening to the news and Fox News and everything with my mom. And then I found out about PragerU, I believe freshman or sophomore year of high school. But my involvement in politics, the true fire behind my love for politics, my passion for it, didn't really start until junior year of high school. I went through the whole cancel culture thing because I'm a major conservative girl, only Trump supporter in the school. I was senior class president, senior year of high school. And I think that's when, everybody knew my name. And then when this whole issue happened, it was like, oh, we really don't know who you are. You're just this far right-wing crazy person and you don't know what you're talking about. And we don't want your tyranny in the school and everything. So I went through all of that. And then just after that, I'm like, you know what, that was not okay. The administration in my high school didn't even stick up for me one bit. They kind of told me that I was in the wrong when later on today, in a minute, you'll hear why. But after that, I thought, you know what, that's not okay. And I know that so many other students are facing what I went through a couple years ago in high school. And I know that so many people would think oh, it would never happen to me, because I said the same thing, until it all started with something I posted on social media all during the BLM movement. And that's how the whole thing started and kicked off. And so I know that so many people are like, that's never going to happen to me. And then when it does, they're like, well, I don't want to share it because I don't want to bring attention to myself. And that's exactly what I thought. I was like, I don't want to take it anywhere. Like my mom wanted to take it to Fox News. And I was like, no, I'm trying to apply to colleges. I don't want anybody knowing what's going on. And so, but ever since then, I was like, I need to get involved more. And I think this is my true calling. And that's how it all started.
I love that. And really the only way to defend free speech, or one of the most prominent ways, if you will, is just to speak freely, to continue to do
exactly.
that. So I'm very proud of you for, especially even when you're in an environment, where maybe you aren't kind of, going with the flow with the culture of a school or something. I completely understand how hard that can be to really stand your ground and defend your values. And I'm more than impressed and proud of you for doing that, because it takes a lot of courage. Yeah. So one of the things that I always challenge my own students on in history classes is, in today's world of instant gratification and the craziness of social media, we tend to take a lot of things out of context, and we tend to kind of jump the gun with emotions and not really define terms when we're talking about things in politics, if you will. So in your own words, how would you describe cancel culture? What is it?
I definitely think cancel culture, I remember it started like about 5 years ago, roughly, maybe even before, I'm not sure. But I haven't been on social media for more than 5 years. But I remember just, certain things like when celebrities or singers or just anybody that we really idolize would tweet something and everybody would just completely take it out of context when it might just have a completely different meaning than what the viewer thinks it has from what the person's actually trying to like tell everybody on social media. Just people would cancel other people on social media, like, oh, just you said the wrong thing, or you posted a picture with the wrong person that most people would not really care for in society. And so we're going to cancel you. We're going to like make your career just fall off the face of the earth. And I think everybody saw cancel culture as like, this is our way to get into politics and get rid of people that we don't want, like people that we think should not have a voice at all. I mean, that's what people try to do to Trump and delete him off Twitter, but and so I think it like started in the professional world, and it sprouted all the way down to just on the individual level, like at my own high school, like, oh, you said the wrong thing. Oh, you liked this post on Instagram and it showed that it was some sort of support towards Trump and like loving America or whatnot. Then they're like, oh, like we don't want to be your friend. And so it starts from that, and it just spreads.
It breaks my heart. And this is something I've been trying to really figure out, because I was wrapping up my master's degree and doing like my comprehensive exams and everything when the Trump administration was, well, really during the campaign, more so. So I feel like I had like kind of in regards to college, the last little bit of normalcy kind of, if you will. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately for you, I feel like you're like kind of going straight into it during all of this, intense political polarization. So we are kind of, dealing with this behemoth issue from different perspectives. But in your opinion, how do you think this really started? And especially like in education, whether it's high school, college campuses, like based off of your research and your own experiences, if you had to pinpoint kind of like a turning point for when cancel culture becomes a legitimate thing that we're dealing with in education, what are your thoughts on that?
I think it's definitely when the younger generation, like everybody my age group a few years ago when we were all in high school, when they started seeing what was going on in politics and saying, you know what, all of a sudden we want to be involved. When for the past year, when year after year, especially with their parents, so many people have kept their head in the sand, and then all of a sudden they want to come out. And I think especially around the election with Trump, like right after that, everybody just hates on him because they're only basing it off of what they see on social media. Oh, this is a post that I really feel in my heart that I agree with, and that agrees with like my left-wing views. So I'm going to repost it. And this is exactly like they form their whole ideology off of the simple quotes that they see on social media. When unlike them, I do my research. Every time I post something, I double check it. I fact check it online. And so they didn't want to do that. And it's just kind of easier for them to say, yeah, I don't like this person because of what they said, or I don't like this person because they're friends with this person, And so it definitely kickstarted when I think my generation was like, oh, we want to be involved more, but we don't know how. And then just having the phone at your fingertips 24/7, it's not healthy. And it didn't start the way that it should.
Yeah. And I have a particular belief. I think our generations have a very unique place in the context of world history. And in a sense, you and I are both kind of living through this grand experiment, if you will, especially in regards to education. But like for instance, millennials, we were the first generation to grow up with digital technology, but simultaneously the last ones to grow up in an analog world. Gen Z is the first to truly grow up like completely in a digital world. So I think you are really, you really highlighted something super important, that your like Gen Z especially was so much more involved in politics because of digital technology. And what I've noticed with my own students, because most of my students are Gen Z as well, Gen Z is phenomenal at acquiring sources and getting information, but they're not always the best at vetting the sources. And it's not entirely their fault, because educators don't always teach them that. It's very hard to vet things with mainstream media, especially. But the other thing you mentioned too was kind of like this Trump phenomenon. And how do you think the Trump administration truly impacted Gen Z? More so,
I think that was when everybody was like, we're kind of sick of what's going on in America. And so parents are opening up their eyes more. Students my age have family members that are like, this is what's really going on. We need to listen to this man. So all of a sudden, people my age were like, okay, like whatever their parents are saying, they want to hear it too, So they start hearing what they think about Trump, and they're like, well, let me go see for myself. And then they'll find up anything on YouTube and like, oh, you know what I mean? Like, it's just, he was kind of just like such an easy target for people my age. Like right when we started like over that hump of maturity of, how to use social media, how to do it properly. And honestly, it doesn't help when you're in the classroom and your teachers are talking about everything but what you're supposed to be talking about, And so it's like when you have a different opinion from your parents, because you are so passionate in your heart about human rights and everything, and you don't exactly know what's going on, the moment your parents says something that you don't completely agree with, you're going to obviously run to the person that does say something that you very much agree with. And that a lot of the time is the teachers in our school.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent point. And sometimes I think instructors forget that, and they almost kind of abuse the power that they have, the influence that they have. Yeah, and that really breaks my heart. And that kind of is a good segue into one of my other questions. Throughout your college experience so far, do you truly feel like you've been able to speak, think, and write freely?
Absolutely not. I've only been at Chapman for 2 semesters as of right now, but I've already had plenty of professors where it's like, I feel like I can't get a breath out of my mouth before they harp on me and they start like, they start pinpointing the students. And so I knew it was going to be really crazy for me this past spring. I had a philosophy class. It was Intro to Ethics, Philosophy 104. So super simple, just did it for the GE. And I was like, oh, this is really interesting. And then once you start the class, you finally get the syllabus. And I'm looking at all these things like, we're going to be talking about capital punishment, an abortion, BLM. And I'm like, what? Like, no, you're supposed to be teaching me like why I should be arguing that the grass is green and that the sky is blue, not purple, And it was just everything but what it was supposed to be. And my professor really made sure it was his job to pinpoint me and one other student in my class. Wow. She and I were the only 2 conservatives there. And, every time he really divided us a lot in the sense that like he would ask a question, like when it came to the abortion week, he said, raise your hand if you agree with abortion. 99 out of 100 people are going to raise their hand in the room, obviously, especially in that class with that kind of teacher. So he said, who does not agree with it? And that one girl and I were the only ones that raised her hand. And he literally looked across the room knowing we were the only ones that had our hands up. And he looks at us and goes, as usual. Like, he makes it known to the class that we are the only ones that feel that way. And he did that every week when we talked about gun control, abortion, just everything that you can think of that you would split between like liberal, conservative, right wing, left wing, whatever it was, like he made it his sole purpose to do that. And I remember one time in class, he said something about gun control, like it's the number one death of 19-year-olds. He said 19-year-olds and below. And I said, well, there are so many, if not by far, way more students or children that drown in swimming pools. Should we get rid of swimming pools? And he goes, well, that's wrong. That's not actually true. And I'm like, you don't even know where I got that source from. I actually looked that up. And it's just so crazy. And then just for everybody to be looking at you in class because the teacher is letting the class know, I don't agree with what she just said. I don't agree with her and that other student because they are so conservative. So in the classroom, I wasn't able to feel comfortable talking about how I felt because he would immediately just like pounce on me and say, no, I don't believe in that. He literally said, you are wrong. And I'm like, I don't think so, but okay. So I just looked at that. And the same professor, he gave me a lower grade on a paper because he didn't agree with capitalism.
That was going to be one of my other questions. Like, did this impact the grade? Oh my
God. So people, they don't know what's going on. They really don't. People are saying, oh, that's not happening at your college. Like, it's not real. I've never heard of such a thing. And I'm like, well, here I am telling you that it is going on because I've experienced it one-on-one. And I'm going to continue to experience it probably till like I graduate. And it'll only get worse when I'm an adult.
Well, and I mean, I won't BS you. You know, it's not going to be like an easy fight. From a fellow like free thinker in academia, I can't look you in the eyes and tell you like, hey, it's going to be a walk in the park during your college experience. Right. It probably won't. But what I want you to stay focused and encouraged because you really do help more people than you probably realize by speaking freely, by telling me your story, by us publishing this, you know, kind of taking it into our own hands and doing self-publication. That is going to help a lot more people to speak up. And I think that's incredibly important we're living through a very difficult time in American history. And I think it's so important for us to kind of take back agency over the narrative, you know, these academic narratives, and to not continue to fuel the division. So I'm curious though, like from the student side, if the instructor hadn't kind of created that environment, do you think the students would have been able to find common ground on a lot of issues?
It really depends on what class it is. I think knowing that I was basically the only person with conservative views in there, I was very much not going to be even allowed to try and find middle ground with them because they were just so aggressive about it. Like I remember this girl next to me, the only other conservative in the class, you know, she made a comment one time explaining like how gun control is not the answer to our America's problem about school shootings or whatever, right? And this other girl's like, what does she know? You know? Mm-hmm. So even when it's not their time to talk, like they make it known to you, like we're not even going to let you try. But again, every class is different. I had a international relations class this past semester with my friend, and he and I were definitely the noticeable Republicans in the class. You know, if there were other ones, we weren't really sure, but people, I think we made it pretty obvious that we were. And our class was actually very, very good at having discussions. So like a politics class versus a philosophy class. Mm-hmm. One was so aggressive. And I was like, I can't do another semester with these people, you know, versus a politics class where it was very bearable. I didn't mind going to class 2 or 3 times a week with them. And so it all just depends on the topic. And but like you said, it depends on how the teacher is too. I think if my philosophy teacher this semester wasn't like that, I think it might be a little better. But at the same time, it's just as much coming from the students as it is from the teacher.
Wow. And that's hard. I mean, this is good for me to hear, though, because I'm kind of like on my own little island sometimes too. And I don't really get to understand the student side of it that much. So I'm incredibly grateful for you taking the time to speak with me because you know, I mentioned this to some people in the Lincoln Club as well, that really, in my opinion, the only other people that school administrators want to control more than students are the instructors themselves. So I mean, I was isolated as a free thinking, you know, like kind of conservative student, but then as an instructor, it's like the isolation increased, you know, so I'm incredibly thankful for you talking to me about this. And my other question was, going back to that first teacher that you mentioned, did that instructor, after kind of like pointing out the division, did they like kind of give tools on how to like work through that division and find common ground, or did they just kind of leave it as is and wanted it to be a little bit more divided?
Oh, he left it for sure. It was because it was one of those classes like he just lectures the entire time, and if you have questions, then you ask, but it really was just a lecturing class. So not only that setting where people are like, oh, we're expected for him to talk the entire time, like we're not really supposed to, I don't believe. But at the same time, it was like he really wanted to be like, okay, I'm going to divide you up. Who agrees with this and who doesn't? Okay, you're split. Okay, next topic. Like, you don't even have a chance to try. And so he made sure to keep it that way all semester, because if he didn't want to be divided, then he would never have asked those questions. Like, he was purposely, intentionally pinning us against each other every single week with every new topic.
Ooh, not a fan of that. And this is actually not one of the questions I originally sent you, but in your college, all of your education experience so far, do you think diversity of thought is being promoted within education right now?
It's funny that you asked me that. I think it's hilarious because they say that my school's all about diversity. You'll have every race and skin color there, and that's fine. That's great. But when it comes to diversity of thought, they promote it. You have to be inclusive, blah, blah, blah. But according to them, even my sorority, only left-wing views are considered inclusive.
Okay. And someone has explicitly said that? Wow.
So I am very, very vocal on my social media, on my Instagram specifically. And there's one girl from my sorority, and she's constantly texting me on the side, responding to everything, why do you feel this way? Well, you're really hurting people in the chapter. And I'm like, if anything, your opinions are tied to the chapter and representing us way more, because you have she has some sort of director position. I don't, I'm just one person that's in the sorority chapter and pays the fees every month, So I'm not super involved, but because people know my name, and because they know that I'm a conservative Trump supporter or whatever, they're making it their job every single day when they wake up. Like, oh, we need to target this girl. Let's see what she's posting on social media next. So they say, so it actually happened yesterday. This one student in the sorority, she texted me on the side on Instagram, replying to something I had posted about gender ideology stuff or whatever, right? And she said, why do you feel this way? And I explained really simple, I'm not going to fight with you, but this is how I think. And she goes, you're being really, really offensive. We can't allow this in the chapter to go on. It is my job to educate girls in the chapter to be inclusive, and what you're sharing is making people feel really offended. And we can't have this going on when we're trying to welcome new recruitments next spring. Mm-hmm. And I was like, it's so funny that you say that, because you only attack me because I'm the only basically right-wing person in there, So it's very, very one-sided, very hypocritical. And she explicitly said to me, because what you say is just judgmental and offensive. And she's always posting pro-choice stuff, pro-gun control stuff. And I'm like, that's offensive to me. You're saying that in the chapter. You're not making me feel welcome because you're crapping on my beliefs all the time, So I told the girl, I was like, kick me out of the sorority at this point. I really don't mind. There is no diversity of thought at all. You're only allowed to think for yourself if you're in the left. And if you're not, then it's not a thing. You're not allowed to.
That breaks my heart, because I know it's true. I live it as well. And it really just, it's awful. That's not supposed to be the experience for a college student. When you go to college, you're supposed to be exposed to different ideas, and your instructors, your instructors should be the ones, especially setting the example of how to talk to people you disagree with, maybe at times in a very respectful way. But I think this is part of the problem of the division. Is I noticed this with students, that if the instructor doesn't set the tone for the classroom, really establishing that this is a place to be respectful, when students disagree with each other, it's not just, oh, we disagree. It's a contempt and almost like a demonization, and especially an attack on their digital presence, if you will, which I know is that's a huge part, not only of life now, but it could inhibit future, students in their career up in years ahead. So it's a huge problem. And
it's only getting worse.
Yeah. And this is why I think it's so important to talk about it, because this is just not, when we do this, when instructors do not facilitate healthy, productive, safe classroom environments, essentially what we're doing is creating a very fragile student who can't handle any other different ideas. And we're not really setting them up for the world. We create students, but we don't really create scholars. And I think that's such a disservice when you invest all of this time and money. That's just not, in my opinion, what education is supposed to be like at all. But I did also want to ask you, how has the COVID-19 pandemic truly impacted your academic experience?
That's a really, really good question, especially because my whole cancel culture experience happened exactly 2 or 3 months when junior year of high school, we were all sent home because COVID had just hit us. And, we got the text messages in the very last period of class that day, like, all of a sudden there's this worldwide pandemic. People are dying left and right. Like, we can't keep you in school right now. And it just kept extending. And my whole cancel thing happened a month or two into being at home. And so it was frustrating because even though we were going through Zoom and everything, I wasn't physically there in person to like defend myself against what people were saying from somebody else, and it didn't help that I did have liberal professors that did not agree with what happened to me. Like, they probably think that I should have like been expelled out of the school, like, I know there are so many different opinions, people will give you cold stares even through the Zoom call. I'm like, I know that they don't like me. I know that they don't like being in the same class with me, but I mean, we're all here for the same reason to learn. And it was just very frustrating because I wasn't able to defend myself a lot of the time. And it was all hearsay. Oh, well, this person isn't friends with her anymore because Deirdra did this and Deirdra did that. And, I'm not conservative like her, so I believe that she really is a bad person like everybody else in the school says she is. And it was even worse for me because my school was, my graduating class was less than 150.
Wow.
And so my entire school was barely 600. So it spread fast. Like, if you didn't know at least one person every grade, then like, what are you doing? You knew everybody. And so I think that's what even made it worse. Like, it wasn't just in my class of like 30 to 50 kids. No, it was the entire school.
Wow.
Plus the principal, because now she's aware of it because everybody's talking about it,
I mean, I imagine that just has to make you feel awful. Like, how did you deal with that?
I think you can imagine like what it was like. It was very, very hard. I mean, I lost all of my friends. And it's funny because I think the average student going through that as a teenager, when it's like the most emotional years of your life, everything's heightened, your hormones and everything. Not once did my grades take a hit for it. I had straight A's maintained the entire time. Like, I have never let anything actually ever affect my schoolwork. And I was really shocked. Like, if you were only looking at my transcripts, you would think nothing has ever happened to me. But then when you actually talk to me, you're like, wow, you went to school every day? I really thought, like, when we went back, the first day I had a panic attack. I thought somebody was going to come swinging at my face because it was still going on. Like the comments and the little like snipers at me, like it was still going on all the way till one whole exact year later. So it was very, very hard. But I mean, I stuck my ground. I'm not going to compromise my beliefs for anybody because once you start doing that, you're never going to stop. Like it's you're going to have a whole other battle to fight within yourself about like trying to stay strong against people because you don't want to lose friends. But I was like, these aren't true friends anyway. So I was completely okay losing them because I knew if they were true friends to me, then they would have backed me up because they know the person that I am. And I've never judged a friendship based on politics. That is just not me. If you personally know me, you would know that. So it was very, very hard socially, especially because you're not in person. Like, if you don't have that balance between academics and a social life, then you kind of fall short in one area, lack somehow, But I was able to maintain that the entire time. But then for the whole thing to hit me during the pandemic when I couldn't be there in person to like talk about it with anybody, that was very, very hard because you're going to a pandemic, all of a sudden you have no friends. You come back to school exactly 12 months later, you still have no friends, and it hasn't really changed. Like, the opinion about you hasn't really changed at all, actually. And so, I mean, I made some friends later on, people that probably were like, oh, this whole thing is stupid of what happened to her. Like, we're not going to focus on it. But there was just, I don't know, there were like a lot of triggers everywhere, I really did, like, not until the day of graduation, I really wasn't able to finally sit back and take a breath. Saying, like, it's finally over, like, once I walked the stage, you know what I mean?
I do know what you mean, actually. And that's why it breaks my heart to just hear that. And too, like, but it also, I mean, I'm not saying it to sound cliche or anything. Like, I genuinely have so much respect for you, especially because anxiety is something that, yeah, I've dealt with severe anxiety. And it was amplified by the pandemic as well. And being alone,
absolutely.
Being alone. Yeah. And a panic attack is no joke. Like, that sucks to have a panic attack.
Yeah. It was.
Yeah, it's not fun. And this is why I think it's just so important for you to really keep telling your story, speaking freely, because this is how we heal. Like, this is a problem, but talking about it, being honest, and finding that common ground with all people from all walks of life, that's so important, and I don't know if you are a woman of faith, but I'm okay. So yeah, I mean, like, I truly believe, that there's a reason for why we go through what we go through, and that God sends you to the place that you are needed, and when you become a Christian and you tell God, like, I'm living for you, it's like, dang, he puts you to work fast, but I'm beyond proud of you and have so much respect, because I know that's not easy at all. But the good thing is that hopefully by us talking about this, that experience won't continue on. Like, that's what I really want. That hopefully our interview will help someone to, come on the show too and talk about it, or, be more respectful to people who have a different opinion. So definitely. And this, again, as we're talking, I keep diverting from the questions I sent you because new ones are popping up in my head.
Right.
But I have another question that I didn't originally send you, if you're okay with this, but as a teacher, I can't resist, like, the chance to ask. Because something that I've noticed and something that I put a huge emphasis on in my classes is the Constitution. I teach American history. So I'm curious, because I think like roughly half of your high school experience, or no, how much of your high school experience was online?
I remember being sent home exactly March 13th of junior year, so of 2020, and then came back March 13th of 2021. So it was for one whole year, and then we came back to school for the last 2 months of school. So it was basically a year.
Wow. Yeah, that's a long time for
a semester. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I'm especially curious then about how this was, or your experience with this topic, given being thrown into this during the pandemic. But did any of your teachers throughout high school or throughout college, have they really taught you anything about the Constitution? Did they put an emphasis on it, especially in the classes where it should have been? Is this something teachers talk about?
During U.S. history, yes. I mean, we had to memorize the first 6 amendments for a final or a midterm, something like that.
Okay.
And
there's hope.
Right. And the 5 or 6 foundational principles behind why the Constitution was made.
Good.
But other than that, it was ingrained, hammered into my head every period, 3 times a week, and he was a really great teacher. But that was really the only time that we talked about it. So honestly, no, if it wasn't for him in the beginning of every class, making sure right when we would walk and we would sit down, he would give us all a piece of paper. He'd be write the blah, 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 write the first 6 amendments, write the 5 founding principles, or whatever it was. Between the two of those every day. But if it wasn't for that, other than that, it really was never brought up. Never.
Well, I absolutely love this teacher for putting emphasis on it, because that's when my students get to my class, especially if they're fresh out of high school, that's one of the number one things I'm always completely crestfallen about. It's because by the time they get to a college history course, the expectation is that they'll have a pretty good understanding of the overall structure of the Constitution, and that knowledge is slipping away. And I think the pandemic really amplified that and has turned this into a huge issue. So thank you for helping me with my research on that topic. Now,
of course,
I am a notorious teacher who goes on tangents, I have to look at my list of questions before I get distracted again.
I don't mind answering anything.
So kind of expanding a little bit more on the online education, what do you, in your opinions, what are the pros and cons of online learning?
Yeah. So, pro, is definitely, so I have always been a student that's always enjoyed working independently. I've always hated group projects. I don't have to rely on other people for work, and I hate that people have to rely on me, because I am a bit of a procrastinator, but I get my work done at the very last minute because I work extremely well under pressure for whatever reason. And that's really weird. But, yeah. And so it's funny, but, I think a major pro is online learning is great for students that and enjoy being independent and are mature enough to stay on top of their own schoolwork. But it's a huge con for students were like, there were times where I was struggling with math. Math is not my subject at all. It's my brother's, but definitely not mine. And so there are times where I'm like, I can't be there in person. I'm a visual learner. You can't just try and write it out on a whiteboard app on the computer screen through Zoom. It doesn't work for me that way. So at times like that, when you need one-on-one help, you're not there in person to shoot your hand up and say, I need you to stop right this very second and clarify this before we continue, or else I'm not going to do well on whatever it is that you have, And it's also, like I said a little bit ago, it's also not good for us socially because, again, like you're stuck at home during COVID doing nothing but assignments because it's really all that you have to keep you going. Like, as long as you have a to-do list, like that's the only thing on your to-do list, homework, so you don't get to be in person with your friends because it was like an entire 2 semesters worth of friendships being on pause and then coming back and like, but you can change so much in a whole year. So it was like, well, we have to become friends all over again. So the social side of it, it's really, really rough. Unless you don't really care for a social life, like you know what I mean? But I think it really does depend on the individual and the student. For me, I did phenomenal. I went to a half online, half in-person school the first 2 years of high school. So transitioning to COVID, I was fine. I was like, oh, I did this for 2 years straight. I know what I'm doing. And it's always been very easy for me to stay on top of my schoolwork. I don't need to be told by my mom, did you get this done? Did you get this done? I don't need my parent logging into the grade book because a parent can have their account. My parents never did that once because they didn't need to. But there are other students who do need that. So it just depends. But there definitely are pros and cons for sure, not just one or the other.
No, and I agree with everything you just said, because not only was I teaching during the pandemic, but I got the bright idea to start a PhD during a global pandemic. So it's either my best decision or worst decision. I don't know just yet. But so I had to be a student too during all of it. So I agree with everything that you said. I did want to ask you a little bit more of like kind of a philosophical question or theoretical question, if you will. And again, I'm just going rogue now because now new questions are.
Go for it.
But I'm curious, given what you're studying and your experiences, do you honestly think that our founders would be proud of America today?
I'm not too sure. Honestly, I think, would they be proud with how much we have evolved? Absolutely. But would they be proud with the people in charge and leading us? Absolutely not. I think you and I would both agree that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are not the people that the founding fathers would want in office. That's absolutely not. Our society has become so godless, and America was founded on like Christian principles, like in the belief in God. That's why we say God in the Pledge of Allegiance, and for people to want to take it out, I think that's just absolutely horrible, because this is what it was started on. You can't just take that away because you disagree with something that somebody's doing, or just because you absolutely hate Trump and everything and you love Joe Biden. You're like, oh, Trump said this as a president, so I have to hate America all of a sudden. I don't think I want to believe in God anymore. And I want to kneel during the Pledge of Allegiance. Like, what is that? That's absolutely ridiculous. You should be, I think the founding fathers would also be extremely just shocked, utterly flabbergasted at the fact of how many people who claim to be proud to be Americans versus the number of people that say that they aren't. Because then why are you here? You know what I mean? Like, we don't want our population to make up of a majority of people that aren't proud, that don't want to be here just because of Donald Trump ever being in office. I think a lot of people use that as an excuse. Oh, he was allowed to be president, so I don't want to be a proud American anymore. That's ridiculous. You know what I mean? Like, it shouldn't be about that. It should be about what we were founded on and why we were created. We have the most freedom in the world. And why are you abusing it? Why are you saying that you're not loyal to us anymore? So, how much we have evolved, absolutely, but the attitude that we have developed, absolutely not. I think it would probably kill them. I think it's very sad.
Yeah, I agree with you entirely. And as I continue teaching, I think part of that attitude really is fueled by the decrease in historical education. And I didn't realize it entirely what was going on when I was earning my bachelor's and master's. But there really has been an attack on American history classes and teachers not, I think especially in college. I think if students really had the true story, like in a sense, the R-rated version of American history, where we didn't hold back and we told you all of the
Right.
beautiful things as well as all of the blemishes, I think more
Right.
students would be genuinely proud because they would get it. They would know the messy side, the complexity, everything that it took, like the sacrifices. And
Exactly.
especially as ladies in academia, like that's not something I take lightly at all. I defend that,
Mhm.
you know, it definitely extremely. I take it seriously, protecting that for the ladies. But then it is also kind of like how you were saying, we have the most freedom. This is, I think, it's
Mhm.
that lack of history education because, especially for women, I think if we taught women's history to the best of our
Right.
ability, then they would, especially the ladies in America, would see just how much they do have and how disrespectful it is when we don't capitalize on those opportunities that the ladies before us,
Right.
sacrificed for. So I agree with you that I think they would be proud of the progression, but not so proud about the attitude and the lack. But I think people just don't know anymore. We don't teach them, which
Exactly.
is a problem. It's a major problem.
It is.
Yeah, entirely. And I wanted to conclude our interview with kind of a different question, if you will, because I think the pandemic really, on one hand, it kind of took away the power dynamics between student and teacher a little bit, especially like when you had to go on a Zoom call and you saw your professor in their real home or something. It was like, oh, they're a real
Right. It's
person.
weird.
Yeah, so I think online education was good for that sense, but maybe not so good in the sense that it did also kind of create this weird isolation, and especially for conservative students or even Christian students. So I'm curious, as an instructor, what are some things that professors could do to make conservative students feel safer, to feel more included? Like, what are things, because instructors tend to get a little bit stuck in their ways and they don't like to
Right.
adapt. But the reality is like, we are here for you. It's our job to help the
Mhm.
student become a subject matter expert. It's not about us. So what are things that you think instructors can do to help create a safer classroom environment for all students?
That's a really great question. It's a phenomenal question, actually. I'm glad you asked. Number one, don't pinpoint students, don't divide them. Some people don't want their views to be known, and that's completely okay if you want to be private about it. Some
Yeah.
people, like you and I, we love being vocal in politics and such. Other people, they want nothing to do with it, and that's fine, especially if somebody is still learning. You don't want to pinpoint them and they're, well, I don't really know how I feel about this. Number two, open a lot more room for discussion. If a student has a question, let them ask, even if it's opposing. Like, if my professor for philosophy this past semester was a lot more, was just a lot nicer to me and the other friend of mine in that class, about our views, I would definitely have asked him in the middle of class. I wouldn't have minded, like, I know you and I are both on the completely off, like, as completely far as possible from each other on the political spectrum. We really were. Can I ask you why you feel this way? That way I can tell you why I feel this way and we can compare. And so a lot of people don't do that. It's like you said, a lot of teachers are stuck in their ways. It's my way or the highway, and it's absolutely unacceptable and it's not okay. People get uncomfortable, and then it, you know, there's no room between the teachers and the students anymore for compassion and for learning. Like, then you're not there to learn. You're there to be indoctrinated on what America is really about. And so you have to let them ask questions. Even I love asking people of completely opposing views as mine. Why do you believe this? Okay, well, can I explain why I believe that? And I'm all for respectful discussions. I absolutely love it because that's how you learn. If you're not willing to extend your arm on the other side of the political aisle and try and touch hands at like just barely a fingertip and try to understand the other side, then you're not doing it right. You're just not. And I think a lot of teachers don't understand that yet.
Yeah, that is so true. I could not have said it better. That really is that I appreciate that. And because especially with the things that I hear in faculty meetings, like I feel like we need the students' voice more there. And it's hard, because how do we get the students voice in faculty meetings? Well, by asking them, talking to them, like you said, kind of having that compassion and really
Right.
like, hey, what's going on? I mean, like it was hard to deal with like the course load, but also during COVID, it's like the mental health issues have increased.
Right.
And I don't think instructors are always really compassionate about that either. So I think there's a lot of, looking at it in a positive sense, like there's a lot of room for growth. And I think this is a good like opportunity to really change the problems in education. And I do take it back though. I have one other thing that I want to end our interview on. I always do this. I'm totally a teacher. Never mind. I have one more thing. But I thought maybe each of us could give like a piece of advice to students or faculty who feel censored, things that have helped us. If you have like, maybe if it's one or a few pieces of advice, like tips for how to continue on even when things get hard, like what are some things that you have found that have helped you when you've been censored?
Number one on the list by far, I know for sure, you have to constantly tell yourself, I was constantly telling myself throughout the rest of my senior year of high school, like you have to be okay with letting go. You have to be okay with letting go. And like my mom has lost so many friends in the family or like family friends because of our strong conservative beliefs. But like you have to be willing to let people go. Because if they're not willing to accept you for your beliefs, because I'm a Catholic, I'm a very strong Catholic conservative girl, and I'm very young, and so I've my parents have really like ingrained that in me, and I'm so thankful for that. I have been put through the ringer since forever ago of people that weren't willing to accept me just because of my religious beliefs, and being a Catholic conservative young woman is basically 95% of my personality. It's how I breathe, think, and sleep, and so for people that aren't willing to accept other people's ideologies and how they look at life, you have to be okay and start telling yourself, it's okay, I need to let this person go, because you cannot grow not having these healthy conversations, especially about politics. It's so easy to be ignorant and just stick your head in the sand and say, I'm okay being friends with you, but like we never have to talk about politics. Like there's like married people who don't even like talking about politics. And I'm like, I don't understand how you can do that. Yeah. You have to be willing to let people go and just let them walk out of your life, or even before they have a chance to walk through the door of your life, not even let them in, because if they're not willing to let you be who you want to be and believe in what you believe in, then it's just not worth it. So that's definitely the number one thing, especially for teachers like you too, I'm sure, in your faculty room. And I'm sure it's very hard, but those teachers have to be willing to accept you for that. And, my philosophy teacher, he needs to start accepting students like me that don't, agree with his views, and start letting me, because like, if you don't, then you can't trust him. I didn't trust my professor once. I didn't believe anything that he said because he wasn't willing to let any of us show him the other side. So you have to let go. And it does get a little lonely. Like senior year, it was very lonely thinking I had one or two friends and that was it. But it's like, would you rather hang out with a bunch of fake people that are never willing to ever let you be what you want to be and believe how you want to believe? Or would you rather just have one or two or three people in your entire life that, let you be the person that you want to be? Because those are the people that are going to let you grow. The other people, they're not going to let you grow. It's going to be toxic and you're never going to go anywhere.
Yeah. It's a cliche saying, but your comfort zone does kill you. And I'm a firm believer in that. It does. And in regards to history, there's a much more eloquent way to say it, but here's my way of saying it.
Right.
If you stand for anything in life, you're going to piss someone off. Like, let's just put it out there. So, but I think this is part of the beautiful thing of college is like, this is the time to figure out who you are. What do you stand for? What do you stand against? Where do you draw the line in the sand? And it's also a time to learn how to advocate for yourself. Like that's one of the most beautiful parts of the academic experience. So your advice is, tapping into that 100%. I could not agree more with you. And to expand on it a little bit, for students and for other faculty who maybe like myself had a time where like they feel really isolated. Something that I have noticed about educators or administrators who are on the far left, if you will, emphasis on far left, who are definitely, infiltrating the academic culture, if you will, making it incredibly pervasive at times. So, like kind of a tip, if you will. So the thing about that culture, they rely on catchphrases and they don't rely on evidence. So for any scholar, whether you're a student, instructor, keep that in mind, because if you are constantly backing up what you're saying with evidence, you are always going to win that argument, because the people who are just giving into the culture, all they're really relying on are those catchphrases. They don't have the evidence. They haven't done the hard work, like the actual gritty, scholarship. So if you are that scholar, if you are that student, hold your ground. It's going to be okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then also my students say, apparently I have catchphrases in my classes. I didn't, one of them is true though. I'm like, oh, one pointed it out and I was like, oh yeah, I do say that a lot. But I'm going to say it again here because it's true. My other piece of advice too, especially for anyone feeling censored, always lead with logic, not emotion, because unfortunately, if you are being censored, the odds are against you, and it's a harder fight. But the way to emerge past that or get stronger from it, lead with logic, not emotion. I'm not saying abstain from emotion. Like we talked about, keeping, staying compassionate, and that's how you find like that common ground. But when you're going about your academic journey, especially if you're being censored, but just in really all senses, lead with logic. That's my biggest piece of advice to anyone listening who went through things that, similar to what we have gone through. But thank you so, so much. Are there any other things that you would like to make sure that we preserve in history before we conclude our interview?
I think we got everything out that we needed to. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so glad that you did.
Of course. And you are always welcome back here. Anytime that you have something that you want to talk about, whether it's your own research or you want to bring attention to, you have my number. Just send me a text or call me and we will set up an interview. Anytime, you're always welcome.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I enjoyed it.
Of course.